All of the fastest growing podcasts in the world do a great job of video, and that's because it unlocks YouTube, Spotify, and social for them. We all know how important a good video setup is for a podcast, but it can be super confusing to know what's the right setup for you. And so in this video, I'm going to run through the ultimate podcast setup for each level of the game. Whether you're a beginner with $1,000 budget, an intermediate with $10,000 budget, or an advanced user with $100,000 to spend. I'm joined by my director of photography on a live podcast setup, and we'll give you all of our recommendations on video, audio, lighting, the common mistakes that ruin video podcasts, and the recommendations that are out there that aren't actually true. If you don't know me, I'm Callum. I run a podcast agency working with a lot of the top podcasts in the world. But 4 years ago, I was a complete beginner, so I come at it from all the different stages of the game. So if you want to have success with your podcast, I recommend watching it the whole way through. Let's dive in. Let's start with video, and I'm going to start with video because I think in 2025 in particular, with the rise of Spotify pushing video podcasts, YouTube is where over 30% of podcasts are consumed, and it's certainly where the majority of the organic growth is. I think your podcast has to be video. Now, I started my first podcast, which we'll put a little clip of, was literally with my MacBook webcam using Riverside and starting recording remotely, and I think that's a great place to start if you're a beginner, just to get the reps in. When it came to actually shooting in person, which was quite a daunting thought to me at the beginning, I looked online and I came across loads of recommendations, and I landed on the Sony ZV-E10, which is kind of an entry-level camera from Sony. I would say my experience has overall been positive. We still use them when we do my podcast. But I would say the couple of things to watch out for with that camera. One is, you need continuous power. So you need a plug and a wire going into that camera so that it can record endlessly and not run out of battery, because the batteries will go.
For sure.
On an entry-level camera like that. And when I first recorded a couple of episodes with that podcast, that was one of the things that caught me by surprise, was like, holy shit, the battery's just gone after 30 minutes trying to record at 4K. So that's something to watch out for. Like, make sure you've got the continuous power, and that camera will work for you. But the second problem with those maybe cheaper Sonys is that they overheat. So
it's a great point. Yeah.
I think maybe it's not disastrous. Like we still use them and record for maybe an hour podcast, but it totally depends on the day if those cameras are going to overheat at 40 minutes or an hour 10 minutes. It's random. So I think that's because they've got like a plastic case versus a metal casing. So maybe we can come on to like what have we got here in the room today that's a bit more advanced and maybe doesn't have some of those issues if you really want to invest in your podcast and use some more kind of higher end kit.
The most kind of common place I see on podcasts all the time is the wide cam that we have today, which is a Sony A7 IV. Sony brought out the A7S Mark II, and it was like this watershed moment of like, I can get really nice video with a camera this big. Batteries didn't last, overheated to hell. Like, there was loads of problems with it, but you could get this incredible image out of it. And there was like scenes from big films being shot on them. That is a great place to start. Sony have really kind of nailed into that mirrorless thing. It still overheats. So what we've done today is a big part of the mirrorless. And when I say mirrorless, I mean like the kind of small form factor cameras. The reason that they overheat is the battery is so close to the sensor. So you've just got two things that are generating heat right next to each other with tiny bits of plastic in between, and it's going to overheat. One way you can remove that concern is by, rather than having a battery in the camera, we've got a dummy battery. So essentially it's a cable that goes into the battery port and runs down a cable to a bigger battery, which is external, which we use V-Lock batteries. They're kind of like a standard across film and television sets. So that's what we've done with that. We could power that off mains, but just having, especially when the kind of, guests might come in and you want to get a handheld shot, just being able to get that a bit more fluid more quickly is useful. The limitations of it are you only have a tiny monitor built in. You can get external monitors and stuff, but you also have a lot less control than you do over our next camera, which is this one, which is a Sony FX6. I love this camera. I absolutely love it. It's on so many sets all over the world. Again, Sony just knocked it out of the park with this. It's just brilliant. If I can recommend a camera highly enough, that's top of my list. Perfect for podcasts. It's got controller over everything you want. It's got internal ND, which, without boring people to death, essentially just gives you more control over exposure. It's just nearly a perfect camera for podcasts. You can run 2 audio channels straight into it. I can't recommend it highly enough.
What lens have you got going with that?
So across all of them, we've got the Sony G Master primes. Totally overkill for most people. You probably don't need that. But Sony make basically lenses for nearly every budget. The G Master primes are great because of how fast they are, so how much depth of field you can have. So like with this or with your solo shot, we've got really shallow backgrounds just to kind of make the subject pop off. Realistically, if you're going to be moving between different places, maybe you just need a couple of zoom lenses. They also make G Master zoom lenses, also expensive. For the money that you pay for Sony lenses, I do feel like you get a lot out of them. You mentioned Sigma lenses before. I've had Sigma art lenses, also great. Once you've bought into a camera system, you're kind of limited to some extent with mounts and what lenses go on what. Initially, I had Sigma lenses and I've kind of migrated back to Sony. To be honest, it's just a thing of taste. And once you're at that point, you can really kind of dial it in. Probably not necessary for a lot of people. Yeah.
What about, let's talk about price points here, because I think my Sony ZV-10 was maybe $600 and the lenses were about $500. So, maybe $1,000 for your first camera seems reasonable, but
reasonable in the world of content.
In the world of content, yeah. What about these kind of price points? What are they?
Sure. So Sony A7 IV, I've had that probably a couple of years now, but when I bought that, I think it was about $2,500. So not cheap, but also a lot of camera for that money. There is quite a considerable jump from the kind of, the £1,000 less mark into the kind of 2,000 to 3,000 mark. The FX6, I think, again, I bought that brand new, but I think I paid about 6,000, including VAT. Now you can pick one up for like 4,000 secondhand, which is crazy cheap for what you're getting. And then we didn't talk about it yet, but the Sony Burano, which is completely overkill. That's like, it's just because it's the only other camera I have. You're in, I think, 26,000, including VAT. So that's kind of you don't need 3 of them. And then lens-wise, probably most of these primes are around about £1,500 each. But then they only give you one focal length, only one amount of zoom. So I think if people were starting out and still trying to figure out what their look and what their feel is, probably you're more going towards zoom lenses than primes.
Cool. That's video. So let's cover audio. I think I started with a Samsung. I'm going to check it. So it was a Samsung Q2U at home,
right,
which is about $100 microphone.
Okay.
And again, I think for the Zoom Riverside style podcast recording, again, it doesn't matter what you pick. It's all about just getting those first few reps in. And that mic sounds great. It gives you a really good sound and audio. But then once I'd got a bit of traction and moved to in person, we started using the Shure MV7X. That's a slightly higher price point, maybe like $220 US.
Sure.
And looks relatively cool and sounds pretty good. And then more recently we've upgraded to these, which are the Shure SM7Bs, which are about $400 US. I think similar to your point earlier, like depends at what stage of the journey you're at.
Sure.
The mic isn't really super important at the beginning. But now that we're a bit more advanced and we're creating bigger and better podcasts, I think you can't beat this. It's just super sexy. Just looks gorgeous, it's just got this aura about it that the other mics don't quite have. I don't know if you've got, this isn't totally your bag, but what's your perspective on the audio?
Yeah, so I will preface this with, normally I don't touch audio, so camera and lighting and direction, sure. Audio is not my forte. That said, and my girlfriend's going to kill me for this because she's a music producer, but the Rode NT1As, which are like £100 microphone, it's great, sounds wicked, less than 100 quid, I think, like, a lot of bang for your buck with that. When you're getting into, I think, more challenging environments, so, a Rode NT1A or an entry-level mic is great and mixable when you're in a sterile, quiet environment, you're in your front room or whatever, and there's no background sound. As soon as you start going to offices or central London or wherever it may be, that's just louder and more background noise, you're going to really notice the jump to something like the SM7Bs, which we have. They have that richness, they have that directionality. So, and again, soundies, please don't come for me in the thing, but the pickup pattern is just a lot more closed off. So, we can hear kind of background noise in central London right now, probably not picking that up on these microphones, whereas something a little bit more affordable, probably getting a few more of those kind of problems.
That again is just a killer. If you're recording a podcast and you've got background noise, you want just that extra bit of control to be able to maybe deal with it in the post, rather than rather than have something that you can't really hide, 100%. A digger outside or a police siren or whatever it is.
And also just the, we're not all taking audio and mixing it really professionally. When you're not doing that, fresh out the microphone, these do have that kind of just nice sound to them that doesn't need that much polishing. Whereas, some more affordable microphones, you're going to need to go through that kind of process to get it sounding nice.
Let's move on to lighting, which I think is probably super important here and can make a massive difference.
Absolutely.
First point on that again would be a little bit of a watch out for is, I remember, I think the first light I got, which I got again off of someone on YouTube who said this is a sure thing, this light, you can't go wrong with it for podcast recording. It was the GVM 300D, which I think is about $400 US, and it comes with a soft box, gives out an amazing light, but it has this fan in it, and as soon as it warms up, you can hear it. So you're there like ready to record a podcast, and there's just this really annoying background noise. So I definitely wouldn't recommend that light. What have we got here? What are you using? What do you recommend?
Again, lights for every price point. That's a perfect example of what you get with some of the cheaper ones. The light might look beautiful, but you just have all those other things to consider. I think this is where the kind of film and TV world through to the kind of content world, there is a bit of a gap. It's only recently that, I say relatively recently, that LED lights and kind of, cold running, quiet lighting is kind of an option. And that world has exploded. So there's options everywhere. We're using everything in the Aperture family, which are, I think, a Chinese or Taiwanese brand who specialize in kind of small form factor, but quite powerful lighting options. And what I've kind of done here is we have a main key, which is what we'd call a global key. It's lighting both of us. That's an Aperture 300D. It's very similar to the one that you described. I would imagine that is based off of this. So the Aperture 300D, again, when that came out, everyone had them. It solved so many problems. You get a lot of power out of it for a small form factor, but you're probably in about £1,000 for a light with no softbox, no modifiers, just what you see is what you get. And then the modifiers are probably £150 to £200 each. So we've got one of those, and then above each of us is an Amran F22C, which actually, rather than the 300D, these are probably a great place to start for a lot of people. Again, not cheap. I think probably £1,000 each, give or take, but a lot more control. And because they're so small, they fold down easily. They come in quite a compact case. Great all-rounder.
Hey guys, so if you're enjoying the episode and you want a breakdown of all the tips and strategies so you can implement them easily, I have made a breakdown and I've put it in the link in the description. You can get it for free. Really hope you enjoy it. Now let's get back to the episode. Let's talk about something that just went off in the background there, which is again really useful. So if you're turning up to different sets, different places, like today we're in this amazing 5-star hotel, but for example we can't plug in the light behind us, and this happens more often than not. We have a problem like this. Talk to me about the solution we've got for that.
So I'm so glad, because I can't see behind me, so I'm glad you flagged it. I'll grab it out. So what we do with a lot of locations, when we get here, and we've moved this lamp, it wasn't here initially, and we can't actually get power to it without a cable running through the shot. So the solution is basically small battery lights. And Aperture, again, same family, have brought out these tiny little like RGB panel lights. I'll grab it. And they are magnetic. So they just kind of stick to... Well, they stick to actual metal, and they're just battery powered. They charge wirelessly in the case, and they're great for if you just want to hide a light somewhere, but also for mimicking lamps. If you've got a fireplace and you want it to look like it's lit, great for that. So that's where they're perfect. You just have to make sure that someone's watching them to know when they go off, because at full power, they only last for an hour.
Awesome. When you're thinking about lighting a room as well, just what are the couple of fundamentals there, and like people's faces and
the safest bet, and it's what film and TV has been doing for decades now, is 3-point lighting. And what I mean by that is you have what is called a key, a fill, and a hair light. There's different terms, different phrases, depending on where you're from. The key light is your main light. So if I get rid of our 2 panel lights, which I'll quickly do. So we're now just key lit. There's no other light except our key light. And it's lost some of the shape. All of a sudden our shadows have kind of fallen, not that flatteringly. But as a place to start, you can see us. We're lit. And this is acting as a hair light for us. So we're just getting kind of that little kind of pop off the background.
That's cool. So I don't even need a light for that necessarily. That could just be natural light.
Exactly. But the downside of that is we have no control over that.
Yeah.
If it suddenly gets really sunny, and we are south-facing today, so the sun is going to move across.
Yeah.
That becomes a problem. What we've done to counteract that is put so much light in the room that even if the sun does start to creep in, our exposure isn't suddenly going to go really, really white and bright. So we should get away with it today, fingers crossed. But we do have these kind of unflattering shadows.
Yeah.
Especially, our skin tone's quite similar, but as soon
we're pasty and white.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But as soon as you've got, I don't know, like different colors in the set or different skin tones or whatever it may be, that's going to really start to show up if you're only using one quite direct source light. So we then have these 2 panels. This is kind of like a really traditional TV setup. So key light behind, and then almost like a light hitting each of us from above. So I'll turn them back on. And they're actually ever so slightly warmer as well. So it's just giving us a little bit, less ghoulishness. So we've got the key. These are kind of mirroring the key, to be really honest. So we don't have like a classic 3-point lighting setup. But what you could do is have the key a fill light filling in our shadows, and then this would act as the hairline.
Nice, very nice. Let's talk a little bit about what all these things are recording into. So on the audio side, we're using an audio interface, which is Zoom PodTrack P4. I don't know if that's $100, $200, but I think that's an example actually of something where you can get amazing value. And that was the first audio interface that we bought, and we've just kept it because it's great. It can record up to four mics into it. So unless we go above 4 guests and 4 microphones for a podcast, we're pretty happy with that. Love the control it gives us and the sound that it brings in from the mics. On the camera side, data, like what kind of memory cards do I need here, and like how much data are we going to end up with after about an hour podcast record?
Sure. So it's a bit of a how long's a piece of string. So I can tell you specifically for each camera, but the A7 and the FX6 are both the same sensor and both actually have the same card system as well. So they both run off SD cards. They are great in the sense that they're really widely, available. They can only run off the kind of faster ones. So on SD cards now, there is like a V rating. It goes V30, V60, V90. All of the ones that we run are V90s, so it's kind of fastest, but then more expensive cards. So on the FX6, for every hour of podcast that we're filming just on that camera, we're doing 128 gigabytes. So as near as it matters, 2 gigabytes a minute. The A7 is similar. It's got the same sensor, slightly different processing. So that will have roughly the same file sizes, depending on codecs. Then the Sony Burano is kind of a bit of an anomaly. With what we're shooting on it, it will do probably about 200 gigabytes an hour. But then there's variations on codecs and file size and stuff.
Awesome. But again, like I think don't make the mistake of buying the small memory card. When you're recording for a podcast, you're probably minimum 30 minutes, but sometimes we're going for 2 hours, aren't we? And you need the memory cards to be able to suck that up. Easy 100%. Mistake to make, right? And you don't want to be there, particularly if you're going to try and do more than one recording in a day. You need enough space to cover that.
That's actually a really good point. If you're doing a couple of recordings in a day, and you've got all of the stuff to film for say an hour and a half, you've got all the data, and then you're stuck transferring footage, and it just isn't transferring fast enough because you bought the slower cards because they were cheaper. All of a sudden, you're in a world of pain asking your guest who's arrived nice and on time, and you're having to wait to transfer footage, and it's not good luck. And and also that's when something accidentally gets formatted, you end up losing stuff. It's just not worth the pain.
What's up, guys? Hope you are good. Hope you're enjoying this episode. This is a very quick message to say this episode and all of my content is made by my agency, 7xcontent.com. So if you would like to make amazing content or grow your podcast or just take what you're doing to the next level, then check us out. I would love to speak to you. Now, let's get back into the episode.
Set design, like I think it's often overlooked. How do you think about it?
It's a great point. I do think it is often overlooked. And when I'm directing a podcast and it's like a new project and it doesn't have that kind of visual identity yet, one of the first things I'm asking is like, what do you want it to look like? Forget the putting 3 cameras in a room and that side of things. What do you like? Do you want it to feel warm and inviting and, like we've just stumbled across your living room? Or do you want it to feel clean and slick and, kind of modern, corporate and international? They're very different things. And the content of the podcast can dictate that quite a lot of the time. They're the first things to be thinking about. What is the content trying to say of your podcast? And how can that be represented visually? That's the bit that's often overlooked for me. Everyone just falls into this trap of it looking kind of the same as everyone else's. So I think about what the content says about the visual style. The next thing is the location that you have access to. We're really lucky today that we're in kind of a beautiful hotel suite. That's obviously not always the case. But when I'm walking into a room, initially we're deciding what the frame is. So it isn't as simple as going, that side of the room is great, because you have an array of cameras. So all of a sudden you need kind of 180 degrees of scope. So instinctively, we're nearly always going into corners, just so that you can kind of close off the set and everyone has like a nice angle. But like when we walked into here today, our first thought was, do we go into that corner or do we go into this one? Could have been either or, but the nature of the podcast that we're filming today, it's quite homely, it's quite warm, it's supposed to feel comfortable. And so we could have set up around the kind of dining table and it would have felt more formal, maybe a little cleaner, maybe, you know, a bit more kind of traditional. But that's not the nature of, or the style of what we're shooting today. So went into this corner, set dressed with the kind of more homely feel. So it's just about honestly using the location to your advantage, but always with that thing in the back of your mind of, what do I want the audience to feel when they look at it? Do I want them to feel like they're about to have information given to them and it's all very serious and very stern? Or, you know, have they just stumbled into our coffee meet and, you know, we're all just catching up and we're all friends? Two very different things.
In terms of the cameras positioning, what are you thinking there? Like to get the host shot, the guest shot, the wide, like where are you positioning the cameras to get those shots?
Yeah, so again, it's a little bit of working with the room and working with what you have. So typically you are always going to want a wide angle, just like your nice, safe, doesn't change, doesn't move, 2-shot or 3-shot, however many people are in the frame. You either realistically need a single on the guest because they're going to be doing a lot of the talking. And then if there's a couple of hosts or it's just one, I'll always need at least a single of one of them or both of them. Some people like singles of everyone. With the kind of content that I typically shoot, that's quite rare. Not everyone needs a solo shot of them. And then it's just a case of getting the frame kind of where I want it. So I'm talking to you, but my solo camera's here. So I don't want it so much out of my eye line that I'm kind of constantly doing that. But I also don't want to suddenly like close off the face and I'm only seeing like a side profile. So it's just finding that balance. Whereas with your solo cam, I can't get that any further round because of the couch that I'm on. So it is working a little bit with the room and with the set, trying to kind of find the balance of what looks good, but also what cuts together nicely. And sometimes I will just kind of look at the wide and then look at both of the solo cams and imagine them cutting together and going, does that make sense or does it feel jarring? And honestly, even now, sometimes I look at them and go, they're too similar or too different. And the other thing is, and it's like I've seen it done to death, never cross the line. And what I mean by that is a camera can't suddenly appear here because the eye line will just do that in the edit and it makes you feel seasick.
Great points. Anything last that people don't think about or forget?
I think this is almost more of an edit point, but I think with podcasting, it can be tempting to be a little bit too self-indulgent and kind of drink too much of the Kool-Aid. People are clicking on your podcast to learn something, to find out something about someone they like, whatever it may be. But that doesn't mean that you can't make it snappy, make it quick. They will only indulge you so far on your really long anecdote about something that they don't know. If it's tight and snappy and kind of crisp, even on these kind of more casual podcast feels, I think that's really necessary. And a market that is ever more congested and ever busier, if you're kind of getting to those points quicker, that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, no matter what the kit is, like it ultimately just comes down to the content, doesn't it?
Content's king.
But it is a something that people probably don't consider is maybe just that direction point or producing point. So maybe sometimes you need to G up the the talent to emphasize their points or speak and maybe a bit more exaggeratedly, to cut to the chase, because that's the one amazing thing about a set like this is it's really comfortable and I'm really relaxed here, but I don't want to be so relaxed that the content becomes sleepy. But I think, really, really important point there as well is that if someone's going to sit here for 1 hour, is it comfortable? And these seats right here are really, really comfortable. So we can have a great conversation here and someone is not going to be thinking about their back pain or something wedged under their leg or something like that. So make sure you got those comfy seats there.
Just to finalize on that, there is quite a fine line between, I think people are now craving this level of authenticity. And, in a world that is so often filled with like hyperbole and like exaggeration, that is great to an extent when it's married with authenticity. The moment I think people can smell that it's not the real person, it's not really you, that's when people turn off and kind of go, I've seen this a million times now. So it's trying to walk that line of being authentic, but also being engaging and being interesting to listen to. Somewhere in the middle of those 2 points is kind of where you want to land, I think.
Fern Cotton, she actually this week has put out an episode in a new studio with new camera, new lighting, everything. And that just popped up on my social today and it looks stunning and really pops compared to what she had before, which was maybe at home and not quite so well thought out. So we'll put an example of the 2 different frames, the before and after. I think it can be hard to understand sometimes the difference that it can make by having like a really well thought out lighting set, cameras, all the rest of it. What we'll do is we'll put a link to all the equipment in the description, and we'll also put a little breakdown on my newsletter. So we'll put a link to that in the bottom. And yeah, if you're interested in recording a podcast like this, then I run an agency, 7X Content, and we work really closely with Ben, and be happy to talk to you as well if you've got any questions.